So what is catastrophizing or catastrophic thinking? Well, this is essentially when you make a much bigger deal about a situation than what is likely or actually happening in the first place. Have you done this? Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Vanessa Milagros, and today we're going to talk about catastrophizing, specifically how to stop being anxious. So let's get into what that is and a few examples of how to stop or reduce catastrophizing within your life. Let's get into it. There is something that happens and you completely fixate on that thing, and in your mind, it is way worse than what it actually is, or in all reality, what it actually can become. Have any of us ever done that? Okay, yes. So most of us have experienced catastrophic thinking and have let our minds run away with that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're like, maybe not, I don't know, let me give you a few examples to help. Job interviewing, when you've gone job hunting, looking for a job, right? All of the thoughts that I'm not going to get a job. It's not going to be in the area that I want it to be in. It's going to be terrible.
I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that.
You jump to the worst case scenario and you just fixate on that. Even though, if we're looking at it from an outside perspective, a job interview is a great thing. Yes, it can be nerve-wracking. However, it definitely is doable. There are a lot of us that have done job interviews and have gone through it, and it has been okay. Now, we may not have gotten the job that we wanted at first, and it may not have been at the pay that we wanted at first, and maybe the environment wasn't that great. There's so many different things that come with it. But fixating on the worst possible scenario and believing that it's likely to happen, even when it probably is not, that's catastrophizing. Here's another example. With the different things that are going on in the world around us, it is very easy to get sucked in by the news outlets, different viewpoints. However, that can become a source of anxiety for a lot of us if we're fixating on that and that's the only thing we're talking about. I'm sure either you're thinking of someone or you're thinking of yourself. Is that me? When I start to talk about these things, let's go on to another example. Type A, perfectionist people, raise your hand. Okay. Yes, perfectionism. Fixating on something until it is perfect, which is a fallacy within itself, because you already know that even though something is great, it's never really perfect. And even if you do get it to perfection, then you're turning around 2.5 seconds later, what's next? And then you fixate on that thing. What about failing a test? For all my people in school, if I fail this test, I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to get a good job. I'm never going to get a family. Catastrophic thinking. I'm sure by now, some of you, most of you, if not all of you, have found an example of ways in which you've done that in the past. How about group chats, text messages with friends, and the overthinking that comes with, what if they don't text back? The fact that they haven't text back. What does that text mean? There's no emoji on it. All of these different things. What about presentations in front of your colleagues or coworkers or at school? That can be nerve-wracking, as we know that public speaking is one of the most fearsome situations for most people. The next one, chronic pain. A lot of people struggle with chronic pain, and this is pain that does not go away. It's consistent and persistent. And so it's very easy to get into the mindset of, this is never going to change. This is never going to change. Everything's going to be the same. I'm going to feel like this forever. And research has shown that part of the way that we view and think about different situations ends up becoming what the reality is for you. Right? That manifestation, that self-fulfilling prophecy. Therefore, a lot of individuals that have chronic pain can experience catastrophic thinking from time to time. Look, it's easy for us to assume that if things are a certain way, then they'll probably always be that way. However, that is not always the case. Yet we fear change because there's a factor of not knowing, the unknown. And we don't know what that may be like on the other side of things. We know what our struggles are now. We know what the unhealthy patterns are now, and we can predict those. So it's like, I kind of know what's going to happen and I can predict. So there's a feeling of safety in it. What I don't know, what I can't really predict, that creates fear within me. And so I'd rather just not, even though the space that I'm in right now is really discomforting for me. But remember that continuing to think in this way can create anxiety, depression, helplessness, isolation, and more fear. And so the goal is to try to work on improving, changing, developing our thought process and how we allow our thoughts to impact our behaviors and our lives. And whether we like to admit it or not, our thoughts have such a big impact. It all starts with the mind, and it impacts our behaviors, our emotions, the way we live life, how we view people, relationships, places, things. There are so many different ways that it can impact us. And so, in order for you to live the life that you deserve, which is a life of healthy relationships, happiness, joy, peace, calmness, thriving, success, beauty, laughter, you deserve all of these things. And part of it starts with what you're willing to give yourself. So start with you. And you probably already knew this, but the most unsettling and uncertain times in our lives as humans is between the ages of 18 and 35. So if you're like, oh, I'm in that phase right now, that's okay. Those are the most unsettling, uncertain. What am I going to do? How's my life going to look like? What's going to happen? And honestly, I would beg to differ that it's probably younger than 18 because a lot of individuals, teens, even children nowadays get pressured into what they're going to do and what they're going to grow up to be and all these things. So those are, by research, the most unsettled, indecisive years where we're pushed to make multiple large life altering decisions. And so that can be really, really scary. And so it's easy to think about the worst case scenarios. I get it. And part of this is also because your prefrontal cortex is still developing. However, this is a good thing because now you can say, all right, now is when I want to actually focus on rewiring, altering, changing, growing my mind. And how you can do this is by practicing techniques that help you switch, guide, change train tracks, so to speak, in your mind of how you process information and view the world. So even though it's a scary time, it's also a great time to learn and develop. So let's go into some of the ways that you can work on reducing or stopping catastrophic thinking. Number one, acknowledging and understanding that unpleasant things will happen. Therefore, it's important to work on viewing things in a more concrete or matter of fact basis. So more things rooted in facts rather than in your own mind or your thoughts or what you think is going to happen or what you predict is going to happen. And trust me, this is going to be extremely difficult at first because you're not used to thinking in this way. It's going to be something that it feels forced and almost robotic, but that's the point. I would also encourage you to have outside help, outside support. This could be family, friends, mentors, people who are healthy for you, maybe even a therapist, someone that is going to help you with your goals, someone that you can trust to say, hey, this is my goal right now. I'm going to work on not going to the worst possible case scenario. Therefore, if you hear me say or do some of these things, please call me out in love or something that can help you remain true to your goal. And everybody's different. So for some people, they may want somebody who says, hey, let's get it together. Other people would want someone who says, in love and very nice and very kind, hey, let me just gently tell you about this. This is what I saw, and this is what you asked me to do. Other people would like to be held accountable in a totally different way. That's okay. Just know what works for you and ask for that kind of support from someone who is trustworthy. That's the key word. The next thing would be to focus on changing the way that you view different situations in your life. And so if you struggle with catastrophic thinking, then you're probably going right to the negative about most situations in your life. So a suggestion would be to actually look and take the time to talk about and acknowledge the positive, the beautiful, the nice things, the pleasant things within the different relationships in your life. So an example of that would be within your friendships. What are some things that you actually do enjoy about your friendships if you tend to look at those through a negative lens? You don't need to do this all at once. However, it is important to start to work on it and make it a goal for you. Now, this is not to ignore any unhealthy or toxic things that are happening. We're not doing that here. However, it is to help you to estimate or balance how you're viewing things, usually very negatively, with acknowledging the fact that there are beautiful things and things that make you happy within the different relationships in your life. Maybe that's even within the job that you're working, viewing it as, okay, there are all these terrible things that I usually tend to think about and go to the worst case scenario about. However, my goal is to try to focus on what actually is good about it, not to ignore anything toxic or unhealthy, but to make sure that I'm balancing things correctly, that it's not all negative all of the time. And what starts to happen is you recognize that actually both things can be true. There can be negative things that you don't enjoy, maybe about your job, but there can be positive things that you do enjoy about your job. And both things can be true. But what that does is it helps you to see, am I looking at this clearly? Am I balancing all aspects out? Because when you do, you may notice there are not that many good things versus negative things. Then you have a choice. Well, what am I going to do with this information now? Am I going to just allow this to continue? Or am I going to focus my efforts on, instead of always being negative and going to the worst case scenarios, to instead focus on what I can do about it, what actually is in my control versus what's not in my control at all. The next goal would be to recognize the irrational thoughts that come up. A lot of times with negative thoughts come irrational thoughts. And really, irrational thoughts are just distorted thoughts that convince our mind that this is true, even though it's not. But we're convinced that they are. This can be based on feelings, past experiences, false narratives, and you can know that it's this type of thinking because it's usually very negative, very absolute. Nope, there's no possible change. There's no way this is going to get better. There's nothing. Or it's based on past experiences rather than clear evidence. So for instance, let's say that you've had recent breakup and you're in your feels. You're feeling all of the things. Usually the thought process is, I'm not doing this again. I'm going to get hurt again. Everyone's going to end up hurting me. It's better to just not be in a relationship and be alone for the rest of my life. I'm never going to be happy. It becomes an absolute. It stays in the negative. And it's based on past hurts. Instead of taking a step back when you're ready and saying, you know what, that relationship did not work out in this time frame. I get it. Or maybe I don't get it, but it is what it is. Now, what's in my control is to learn how to love myself, be happy, heal, and move forward. Because when I am ready to be in a relationship in the future, I want to be my best healed self. The same way I want the person that I'm with in the future to be that way for me, their best healed self. That gives you more control over your situation, and it helps you to understand that you are not helpless. You have support. You have resources available to you. You are more than capable and more than able to work through difficult situations that come your way. Next is playing it out. Let's talk about actually playing out the worst case scenario. If you fail an exam. When you fail an exam, is your thought process, I'm never going to graduate, I'm never going to get a job, I'm never going to be able to pay bills, I'm never going to be able to work? Do you go all the way there? And if so, let's go there then. Let's say you do fail this test. Fine. It was a very important exam. Can you take it again? And before you take it again, can you study with a tutor? Can you study the material more or in a different way that you haven't tried before? Can you take a step back and evaluate if this is something that you actually want to do with your life? Is this the path you want to go on? And I get it. When things feel like it is the end of the world, everything is crumbling beneath you, it can feel like, no, what do you mean? I'm not taking a step back. I can't. There's too much on the line. Trust me, I get it. I get it. However, those are usually the times when you have to take a step back and evaluate things, because we spend so much time focused on, oh, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about that? And what about this? When a number of those things are possible, maybe, but what is that helping you do right now? If this is a stressful and worrisome and down to the wire kind of time, you don't have any time to stress about all the possible worst case scenarios. You don't have the time. Instead, take that and say, okay, take a step back. Let me breathe. What are my options here? Realistically, write them down. Speak with a friend about it. Meet with a career counselor to actually assess if this is something that you want to do, or if there's another skill set that you're more equipped to do with your life. Sometimes in those cases, that is the best time to switch gears, instead of years down the line looking back and saying, I did all of that for what? For who? I'm not happy. And lastly is to practice gaining and maintaining a great self-care routine. This is going to be so important because self-care is the time that you take to put back into yourself. We give a lot of our time, our energy, our money, our resources to so many other things every day, but we forget to put back some of it to ourselves because, oh, we'll get to us later. That'll be there later. It's fine. Let me take care of everybody else. As we're dwindling down in energy and motivation, all of these things. So let's take a moment and actually do this. Now, I have a free resource for you guys, and this is my 7-day self-care planner for those who don't have time. I've got you. No more excuses. If you want something where you could just look it up, have something to do it, and that's your self-care for the day, I've got you. Get the free resource down in the link below and share it with anybody else who you think would benefit from it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you learned something new. If you did, comment down below your favorite part of this video or something new that you learned. I appreciate you being here. Consider subscribing, liking, and watch this video next.